Good morning. I now call the August 13th, 2020 Administrative Briefing and Work Session of the Marion County School Board to order at 9 o'clock a.m. Please silence your electronic devices and remove hats to avoid disturbing others. I will now ask the School Board Attorney to explain the rules for the board meeting.
This work session is a public meeting as defined in Florida's Sunshine Law. The board is dedicated to full transparency in its meetings and its work. In compliance with the Sunshine Law, the board has adopted uniform meeting procedures, including the rights for citizens to participate. The board will allow public comments regarding any work session item listed on today's agenda at the appropriate time. Speakers must fill out a request form and hand it to the school board secretary. After the board and superintendent have completed their discussion on a particular agenda item, the secretary will call the speaker's name in the order received. At the podium, speakers are asked to state their full name and address and spell their last names. Each speaker will have 3 minutes. As required by the Sunshine Law, the board must maintain orderly conduct and proper decorum throughout this meeting. Speakers may criticize subject matter and decisions in a respectful manner, but not people. Finally, speakers must be very careful not to violate the privacy rights of others, especially students and their family members, by mentioning their names or other identifying information. Thank you.
We'll now begin our work session with the Superintendent's Administrative Briefing.
Good morning, Chairman Cummings, members of the board. I would like to start by sharing that yesterday our team met with the Marion County Department of Health, and we actually have here with us this morning Kelly Conklin, who will speak about the updates provided to us from the CDC guidelines. I'll go ahead. Let's go ahead and invite Ms. Conklin up, if that's okay, so she can share with us those updates, and we appreciate her time and being here with us this morning.
Good morning. Kelly Conklin, KELLY-CONKLIN. I'm a registered nurse and the epidemiology supervisor at the Department of Health here in Marion County. Excuse me. We did have a pretty lengthy discussion yesterday with the Department of Health and school board members. We did go over some of the CDC guidelines, some of the changes that did happen in June, around June 17th. Some of the quarantine periods were changed and that kind of thing. So I'll just briefly go over what we're seeing in our community and then what you can expect potentially for students this coming fall with the requirements here in Marion County. So currently we are seeing about 100 cases a day in the community. So that would be outside of corrections or long-term care. About 2/3 of our cases are coming from those corrections, either prison or jail, and long-term care facilities. So right now we are seeing a lot of still family contacts or social contacts being in either households or social events like funerals, weddings, political events, parties that people may have, birthday parties, anniversary parties, that kind of thing. So we are still able to link a lot of our cases to other people that have been positive. So, which is a good thing because you can epi-link all of these cases together. So we are not seeing the huge level of community spread that was seen in like New York City or even in Miami and Broward counties a couple of months ago. So that's encouraging. So some of the things that have changed per the CDC on, July 17th. June or July? I'm sorry, I'm getting all my dates mixed up. So some of the changes now are if you test positive for COVID-19, you have a 10-day quarantine period. So from the beginning of symptoms, so if I start coughing on August 1st, then I'm going to need to quarantine until August 11th. So, and then I would be able to return to school on August 12th. That is providing my symptoms have significantly improved, and that the fever is gone within 24 hours with no fever-reducing medication like Tylenol. So that is one change. So it used to be 14 days. It is now 10 days. However, our incubation period is still for COVID-19 2 to 14 days. So incubation period meaning when you were exposed. So you can expect after your exposure to someone that is positive with COVID-19 to begin symptoms anywhere from 2 to 14 days after exposure. So this is why we still continue to recommend contacts to active or to positive cases are still quarantined for 14 days. So this poses a challenge, I think, with the upcoming school year, and something that parents really need to be aware of, that if their child is in class and say their teacher is positive, and we consider them, we do an investigation and consider them a close contact, being within 6 feet, and that they have had significant time between 15 to 30 minutes, then they are considered a close contact to someone with a positive case of COVID-19. So in that respect, that child or those children in that classroom would be asked to quarantine at home with their parents for 14 days. So if they complete their 14-day quarantine and come back and a week later, a child in their classroom is positive, they might be asked to then quarantine again for another 14 days.
Ms. Conklin,
Yes,
real quickly,
absolutely.
close contact. Give that definition one more time
You got it.
because you left out one thing with the definition that you gave us yesterday. There's three components to that definition,
So within 6 feet
right?
and within 15 to 30 minutes of contact. Face masks do not matter.
Thank you. That's the third.
So it's either, so in our community, it doesn't matter if you have a face mask. We're still going on the 6 feet and the 15 to 30 minute contact. In the school system, it does not matter if they have a face mask or not a face mask. They are still considered a close contact.
If they had 15-minute contact,
That's correct.
is that the CDC recommendation?
That is correct. But that is the guidance that we've received from the state.
Okay.
Yep.
And if I may, Ms. Conklin, for clarity, when you say face mask, it's actually face covering?
Face
So a
covering.
face shield or a mask?
That's correct.
So for the record, if a person has been in contact with a person who is COVID positive and they've been within 6 feet of that person for 15 minutes or longer, whether or not they had a face covering or not, they would have to be quarantined for 14 days.
That is correct.
And again, just for clarity, Ms. Conklin, you mentioned yesterday that school board members were present at your meeting. Was it just one school board member?
No, ma'am.
Because we're the school board and,
I'm sorry.
One, just me. It was
Sorry.
okay, I just want to make sure that that's conveyed.
It was just one. Thank you, Ms. Thorne, for that.
There were school, yes, thank you.
Okay,
School
great.
district, Thank you.
Thank you, yeah, and for us, it really matters because of
Yes,
sunshine.
ma'am.
Yes, thank you.
I have one more clarification also. I know it's hard to see without lips
Yeah.
moving.
Yes, I was looking somewhere else.
Okay, so if we're in a classroom, and I know you mentioned 6 feet or closer, and say the teacher was positive, would it just be automatic that assumed that they were within 6 feet for more than 15, 20 minutes? I mean, how do you?
Not necessarily. So a lot of that comes through our investigation of myself or my epidemiology staff. So I think there are definitely going to be different scenarios. So if we're talking a kindergarten class versus a 10th grade class, there's obviously going to be a lot of differences. So in a 10th grade class, your teacher is going to be up front. There's not going to be a lot of hands-on instruction between the teacher and the child. When you're talking about kindergarten or first grade, second grade, even up to probably 5th, 6th grade, you may see some level of interaction between the teacher and the student where they're going to potentially be in close contact. And so that really has to be done through investigation. So we would end up talking to, if the teacher was positive, we would end up talking to the teacher, and so that they could identify each student that they had considerable amount of time with.
Okay, thank you.
And for clarification also, how quickly, once you have been notified that a teacher is positive, do you do that investigation?
Our goal is 24 hours. So our goal is to investigate all positive cases within 24 hours. And our goal is to then, within 48 hours, be able to contact the people that had contact around that positive case.
So, go ahead, that just went out my head.
This is a question for district staff. Where are we right now approximately with the number of students that we're expecting back on campus? And I know that number is changing, but
Absolutely. Thank you, Ms. Thrower. So we are still looking at about 70% right now. It varies from site to site. However, we have about 3,500 students that we have not made contact with. Now, as a reminder to the board, the default in the selection for the online versus the traditional brick and mortar defaulted to traditional. We are, however, making sure that we have contact with every family, with every parent, for every child. So we still are short 3,500 and making sure and confirming those choices. And so we have social workers going out to make sure that we're reaching all of them.
Okay, and I couldn't tell through your math.
Sorry.
What percentage is coming back?
70%. 70.
Oh, that's what you said about what?
Yes.
And then, Ms. Conklin,
Yes.
the other thing for this to work is for us to understand, I want the public to be clear, is that if the person tests positive, how long is it going to take before they get the results of that test?
That was my question, I forgot.
So that would ultimately depend on where they got tested.
Right.
So if their test is sent to LabCorp request, you can expect potentially a longer turnaround time. So our goal at the health department is, and we're working with our school health staff very closely and your HCAs to try to identify anybody in your school system, whether it be teachers or students that are symptomatic that potentially need testing. So one of the things that we have tried to implement is through your HCA or through our school health staff, that they will be given a form that is directly coming from the health department that they can present at the health department that says we need testing based on our symptoms, whether it be a student or a staff member. We are going to have testing. We have our drive-through testing at the Livestock Pavilion every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday from 8 to 10. We are seeing up to 250 tests through that drive-through every day, with our cutoff being 10 o'clock. So it's either 250 tests or 10 o'clock. In addition to that, we are making special arrangements for students and staff to be tested through a drive-through at our facility at 1801 Southeast 32nd Avenue, Ocala 34471, on Monday and Friday afternoons. Monday and Friday mornings and Wednesday afternoons, so that we can capture every single weekday for testing.
So can you kind of, because I heard it, but I want everybody else to hear it, that process. So if a person is suspected of being positive on Monday, can you kind of walk us through that
Yes,
quickly?
so
with
all of
a
those,
teacher or staff
So
member?
I'm still at the point where we were at, where they come to get the test. The director was here and told us that he would work with the state and see if they could get the emergency, like, overnight
State
test.
labs.
and
State
stuff.
labs.
yes ma'am, so,
State labs. You
The
were saying
state
he was sent
laboratory.
to the state labs.
yes ma'am, so we
But
have,
only on Monday morning, Friday morning, and Wednesday afternoon can they come there and get tested. Did I hear that right?
at the health department.
What if they get a test somewhere else? Can it be taken to the health department, or is there any way, or it has to come from your health department to do it?
So we're getting those directly from our health department staff.
And
So we would
those,
be the ones
so
testing.
if someone gets tested on the Monday morning, when do you expect the results back?
Within 24 to 48 hours.
Okay.
So we drive up specimens 5 days a week to Jacksonville. So we have 3 different state labs in the state of Florida. We have Tampa, Miami, and Jacksonville. All of our laboratory specimens go to Jacksonville. So we drive them up once a day.
So I know people that have gotten tested at the health department, and they haven't gotten their test back this quick. So you're gonna.
That's because
you're gonna
that's because
notate-
we did not go to the state lab.
But ours are going to the state lab. Forward.
Yours will be going to the state lab for the school year.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank
So anybody that comes into the clinic or that,
you. From us.
yes, ma'am. So from the school system, anybody that goes into the clinic with symptoms, any staff member that is identified with symptoms throughout the day can go to that HCA or go to that school health staff to obtain one of those forms. So when you bring us that form, we know that then that person has been appropriately screened through one of our staff or one of your staff to say, yes, this person qualifies for state lab testing. and they will bring that to us filled out by the parent.
So if we don't have a school nurse at the site, the principal has these forms or somebody else?
Your HCA will,
What's-
Clinic assistant.
your healthcare assistant. Yes, ma'am.
Could you walk us through that scenario, what I was talking about?
I'm
With
sorry, refresh my memory.
the person being possibly positive on Monday, kind of walk us through that week, what happens?
So if we've already identified somebody as positive, or they're getting tested.
They come to work, they present symptoms.
Yep, so if you have a staff member that comes to work, they're symptomatic on Monday morning, they go to the HCA or the nurse that is in that school. They can then be given the form and then come to our health department on Monday morning, or on Tuesday morning, they can go through our drive-through at the livestock pavilion with that form.
I thought, what I heard yesterday was something different. I thought they said that if they came on Monday, they wouldn't test until like Wednesday. Is that what you heard too, Dr. Garland?
Yes, sir. I thought I heard you say yesterday, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for the staff and students with symptoms that have the paperwork coming from the school. For the
Correct.
state lab to get the response back within 24 to 48 hours.
That is correct, but if we're saying a staff member is coming on Monday morning, that Monday morning testing has already been completed.
Right.
So we don't have any other testing on Monday.
So when would they test?
So they would test on Tuesday. So we have availability to test every single day,
Okay.
Monday through Friday.
That's different.
But I'm
That's different than what we
confused.
heard, because yesterday I heard they
So
would
will they-
test Wednesday.
At the health department, we have a Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.
Okay.
At the livestock pavilion, we have a drive-through on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So
So-
there's 6 chances for them to test throughout the week.
To clarify, though, if they go to the pavilion, will they get the response within 24 to 40 hours? That will be coming also from the
Yes,
state
because
lab?
they're going to have that form.
Okay.
So anybody that has that form, that specimen will be sent to the state lab.
Okay, but what if they don't make it within the 200 people that you're doing before?
It doesn't matter. If they have that form, we will let them in.
So there is a testing 5 days a week then?
Yes, ma'am. They have 6 opportunities, twice on Wednesday.
Is there any way to be proactive about this, that possibly, I just know of organizations, and I'm doing some work for hospice, and about every 2 to 3 weeks, we are tested, whether we're in the administrative building or not. So we just go through testing, whether we're, and I've never been symptomatic, but I've had 2 tests already. Just for precautionary sakes, and I'm just wondering, is there any way to be proactive with staff, especially those that are directly impacted with our students, in just upfront testing of any kind? Is there any way to do that prior to school, those kids coming in the classroom?
We may have the availability through one of our testing teams up at the state to potentially look at getting them down here to test your staff.
It just might ease some parents' minds if we are able to test our instructional and paras, those at the school site that are going to have contact with our kids. I don't know what the cost of that is. I don't know. I'm just thinking it's very simple to do and could be relief for some parents is for the 24th.
And I agree with you, Ms. McCall, that we should have some testing if we can get it done. I think when the task force were put together, they discussed that. I don't know what the reasoning, what came out of that. It would be a huge, monumental task, and I think it could get done and may ease some pain. But one of the things I'm hearing and I heard yesterday in this meeting, and thank you, Ms. Conklin, and all of you guys from yesterday, what I potentially heard is, and y'all correct me if I'm wrong, those that were in the room with us, there's a potential that there could be it's going to be a roller coaster for us, and potentially every 14 days we can have a group of people out of school quarantine
That's correct.
at length.
So
And
this
it could
is
be,
restricted to online?
that's something we have to discuss, because if you could think about this, you can be out for 14 days, come back one day, this is just hypothetically, and then be out 14 more days,
That's correct.
over and over again. over and over again.
Especially in your high school, middle school, high school, if they're rotating classes.
Right. That's huge concern.
And I'd like to, we've been talking about the classroom, but I also want to draw out the example of a bus.
Right.
And a bus driver and students seated on a bus for 15 minutes minimum, correct? So the same scenario would hold somebody in the first few rows or in the middle of the bus. If it's the first few rows, it impacts the bus driver.
That's correct.
And so Chairman Cummings, you're correct, we have to prepare for perpetual disruption. So in the scenario walking through, somebody's out for 2 weeks, they could come back and the very next day be out again, and come back and be out again. So I think the most important thing to share today is to let our staff be prepared, but let our parents also be prepared for this, because the concern is that when August 24th comes, school's back in session. But this is likely not to be a typical scenario, and parents need to be prepared for students coming back and forth, even if they've chosen the traditional model.
Right.
Under current guidelines.
And because of that, some parents may decide to drive their kids to school instead of using the school bus too, to keep them off of it.
But even with that, even once they get to the classroom, they still could possibly be exposed, whether it's a school bus, whether it's a classroom.
So how many?
So when you look around the nation and you see how many schools have already opened, and as fast as they opened, they were shutting down classes as fast.
Well, Reverend Cummings, many of those if you look at the pictures, there were no face coverings
Correct.
on those.
Correct.
And I really think our mandate, I'm hopeful, because the research shows that with the mask, the aerosols do not travel. It mitigates the aerosols. They did not have on face coverings if you look at those pictures.
Correct.
So I'm hoping, very hopeful, that us mandating the face coverings is truly going to help us in some areas in mitigating this.
But even, you're right, but remember what her definition of close contact was.
I understand.
With or without a face mask.
I understand.
Yeah.
But with the face mask,
It should mitigate.
helps mitigate the aerosol spread.
And this is why we have done so much to try to make sure that the brick and mortar option is available for the start of school. Many states have called it, and they are only doing online the first 9 weeks. And my concern is there has been so much proactive effort on the instructional side to prepare for this, but I'm still not hearing enough proactive testing and turnaround. I would hate to see our mission fall flat, because in spite of our best efforts on the education side, the medical mission is not able to keep pace. And I was just doing some quick math, typically around 43,000 students, 70%, around 30,100. We have 7,000 employees, maybe 3,500 of them are, going to be in schools. We're talking a tremendous number of our citizens that then come home. And I think that the innovative thinking is lagging. And what bothers me is that we have NBA basketball players that are being tested incredibly frequently. My understanding is that there are businesses that are testing their employees every 4 days with 24-hour turnaround time. Why aren't we being prioritized more? And it's not a question to you. It is a question to the collective, everybody. Because we have kids that have to get their educations, and some of them really need to be in school to be able to get the courses they need. And I'm just not seeing a match between our efforts as educators and the medical community supporting us. And now it is crunch time.
So what is the story on the rapid test, the 20-minute test? Because I know in Orlando there is and Dr. Gullett's very familiar with this place, and it's called Treehouse Pediatric Emergency Center or something. And I know the kids are going there, and they get that 20-minute test. maybe it's not top-notch or whatever, but they send them back to school. They send them back to their daycare or whatever based upon that 20-minute look. And my grandson had one, and he went back to school, and he had lots of symptoms, but he went back to school when his symptoms cleared up because he had a cold. So since that was negative and his cold symptoms cleared up like in a day, he went back to school just a few weeks ago. So how come we don't have access to those?
So through the CARES Act funding, the county is purchasing a few of those. We have not been given any for the state, for like State Department of Health.
So then there we are.
Yet
Those
they
are through
want us
private.
to open.
Yeah, those are through private vendors of private carriers. But going back to something Ms.
How
Thor
much
just
more
said.
are those than the other ones, though? While we're still on that topic, how much more?
I couldn't tell you that.
So that's a question I'd like someone to tell
Cost.
me.
It's cost.
Cost. Difference between the rapid and the other.
Ms. Thor mentioned something about you work the numbers. Yesterday we used the numbers from summer school. There were about 1,100 kids that participated in summer school. I think, Dr. Gullett, you have those numbers?
Yes, 1,160 and 119 were sent home.
Of the 1,100, so that's roughly 10%. How many staff? I seem like it was about 10% staff
I think
too.
it was about, I think
How
it
many
was
were
Was it Kevin?
about right.
It was about 10% staff. It was about 10% of staff. Yes, so your math is right on. It's about 10% of the staff and 10% of the students got sent home from summer school, which was a 3-week program. So when you open up school, when we open school on the 24th, we need to be thinking about 10% at least that's going to be going home.
So how many of those kids that went home tested positive at the end of the day? Or were they just coughing and went home?
I'm
Two.
looking to Andrea Simmons,
There was
who
two.
has.
Come up, Andrea. Come up, Andrea.
Two. She said two
Okay,
students.
Two.
Two students. I knew there were just a few.
But because of the quarantine issue,
Right.
But if we had rapid testing,
That would
some of those other
speed
kids
things
could
up.
have gotten back in the class faster.
correct.
And the
Right back.
difference is a reminder with summer school, as you all well know, there's a lot more opportunity for social distancing.
Correct.
So the guidelines are a lot easier to follow to not be within somebody for 15 minutes or more.
Right.
Within that 6-foot distance.
So we need to petition the governor, we need to get our senators to go get us some rapid tests sent to you, right? Is that what it sounds like, to help you out?
I
That would
just,
be helpful.
yeah, I mean,
I'll call, I've already called Senator Perry's office, and I'll call Dennis Baxley's office as soon as I leave here and get somebody on the state health department to get rapid tests, because this is absurd. We can't let because y'all are doing everything you can do. We can't let the state health department sabotage this. Somebody up there needs to get on the move and help y'all, because you can only take what they give you, it sounds like. You know, you get what they give you. Okay?
And having the ability to have some roving nurses or having our schools that have RNs be able to help with testing or something, you know. I just don't see it as being sustainable, you know, what we're talking about here, until we get some action.
And why do they have to go to the health department to be tested when we've got health department nurses working for us?
You have 8 nurses.
8 in the health
You have
district.
8 schools that have school health nurses in them out of 56.
Okay, can they just, somebody hire a roving health department nurse, or appoint one of those to be roving or something, that can go to the school site before the child goes home, swab them, and get it to the health department? Instead of depending on the mother to
That would
take.
be our issue, not hers.
Right.
That
know
would
it,
be a
but-
staffing issue for us.
But even for ours, our county is so large, and I know that because I'm in the north end, and I'm telling you, when I pick a time to go visit my schools, it has to be
About an
thought
hour.
out, and it's more than an hour. There's no way I could hit every one of my schools
Right.
in an hour.
Right.
So
But they might not have that many
But
tests.
we also have to think about, from our standpoint, is having consent from parents.
Okay, well, we can get that.
Yeah.
I mean, there shouldn't, that, we should be able to figure
If they're
that out.
coming back to school, to brick and mortar, to me, that's something that,
When mama signs them
Needs
in,
to
they
be
get
required.
consented for a swab if their child is.
That needs to
is
be
in
a
need of
sounds
it.
good in
standard
theory.
form, but yeah.
That sounds good in theory, but I can pretty much tell you there will probably be parents and employees that are going to say the test isn't for me and they won't do it. I can tell you that.
Do what
is-
now?
There will be parents and there's going to be employees that are going to refuse to take the COVID test.
Why?
It's an
Well, then they lose their
individual.
job.
Well, no, not necessarily. You can't lose your job for not taking a test. So it sounds good in theory to do it, but I believe there's laws to protect people from doing that.
Well, and what are our
Imagine
options?
a
What are
parent-
our options if we have people coming back to brick and mortar and we know how communicable this is? How much teeth do we really have to say, if you want this option to be in brick and mortar, you've got responsibilities, and what can we mandate?
And if the teacher refuses to have the test, well, then she uses up her sick leave, and then she's just unpaid for her time she's sitting at home.
Not necessarily.
necessarily.
They may come down with symptoms and they may go home for a day or two and not have a fever and come right back and never have a test but had symptoms. So I'm just being realistic and honest about what we're facing.
Yeah, I don't think you can discipline a teacher. I mean, you have
Well, if they use up their sick leave, they use
Bargain
up their
for
sick
that.
leave, just like any other job. I mean, that's the way it is right now. If you use up your sick leave, it's over.
We do, I mean, we can draft a consent. I mean, we do that for other things in the schools too. But I mean, I think that there is an issue about forcing, it's kind of like vaccines and stuff, you know,
Right.
not to.
Well, that's
open another
okay.
thing.
If the parent doesn't want to sign the consent, she doesn't want to have her child tested, she can put him in virtual school or whatever, or just let him sit at home and not be educated. That's up to her.
I'm not sure we can keep, I mean, I would have to research that, Miss Stacy. but
Research
I don't,
what?
I don't think you can tell a student they can't come to school because their parents won't sign consent for them.
No. But the state requires a quarantine if somebody in the room has it or something. We're telling them, so we got all this paperwork, they can't come back to school until a doctor signs it or their quarantine time's up or something, so I don't understand what you're talking about. They just don't do it. They
As
just
Ms.
don't.
Thorold just said, how much teeth is in this? If we send a kid home, quarantined because of being exposed, and the parent decides to bring him back the next day, what can we do? Nothing.
Well, what's the health department have to say about that?
We have no,
What's the state law? What's the law?
So that's our recommendation, and we can go through our lawyer if need be to issue
A stay or
a
what?
stay-at-home quarantine.
Okay, so that.
But it's a
takes care of that.
voluntary quarantine.
correct, it's still voluntary.
But they don't come back to school though.
It's still voluntary.
It's a voluntary quarantine.
They can come.
So it would be up to you guys to implement that at the school level.
Because I guess if we've got measles or something, we send kids home all the time for stuff that they've got at school and tell them they can't come back. We do it all the time.
I think that if, a couple of things, I would love to see us be able to get,
Rapid test.
before school starts, on a voluntary basis, but very highly suggested that our staff go ahead and get tested just for that comfort level, especially at our school sites.
Let me ask a question. Is it, and along with what Mr. McCall is saying, is it possible that since we still have a week or so, is it possible for us to start sending, like, the bus compound, to start sending groups of people from the district to get this test prior to school?
That's
Starting,
something I would
starting,
have to take back to the department.
starting Monday. I mean, because you got your bus drivers, your custodial workers, those teachers. We can start sending by school, by zone, whatever. Start sending them down. Can the health department
We can
handle that load?
we can discuss it. We can get back to you on
Just on that, just for a comfort level, for our sakes, to get a baseline of where we are, and to get those tests back in 24 to 48 hours. I would be very comfortable with that. The other thing is if we can, if there is a way at all to have available, I'm thinking of the Fort McCoys, the East Marions, that will have a difficult time. Many of those teachers could probably get to the health department or the livestock pavilion, but I'm thinking our parents and kids, if we have a way to, I'm looking at those four corners, which we all know what those four corners look like, if there's a way to have a roving health department nurse or a satellite office or something out there, could we take the health department bus out, have the health department bus be the roving bus? Could you talk to Mr. Lander about that? So that we could actually, because I know they're in the area anyway, they are doing some rounds out there, so possibly the health department bus might be able to do some of that testing in our remote areas, because those people getting to the health department or the livestock pavilion, I can promise you that is not going to happen. So
I do want to say too that by testing your employees at the very beginning of school, this is a picture in time.
Right.
This is that day, that hour, that minute. This is what they have right there.
Right.
That is not going to tell you 2 days, 3 days, 4 days later. So,
but it would be a baseline. At least, I understand that. I understand that, and that's possibly why hospice does it especially.
they're also on an ACA.
Yes, they are.
ACA.
They're under
So,
ACA.
and ACA has mandated that for long-term care facilities.
And I believe that was one of the reasons why the task force did not necessarily recommend it, because it was just going to be a one-time snapshot. So unless we kind of implement something where there's periodic testing,
It gives you a sense of
Right.
false
security.
security.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And you have hit the nail on the head. You know, the places that have been identified as high need are getting the services, which leads me right back around to my question. Why have we not been prioritized as high need and in need of services, considering the tens of thousands of citizens we're going to be impacting? That, to me, is the million-dollar question,
Yeah, and that's
right there.
Yeah, that's the Tallahassee question.
Yeah.
Because it's frequent testing that's the name of the game, not just the snapshot in time. It's the every few days. And yes, I'm sure it's expensive, but somehow important, critical entities are being identified and being served. That's us.
Could you
Well,
take our questions back, and maybe we have a really, real quick turnaround meeting on why we can't get the rapid test? Who do we need to go to get them? How do we request them to get the rapid test for our schools? Because so we've only got 8 schools with nurses. They could swab the 8 nurses there. If they had 3 kids a day that needed to be swabbed, they could do it. I mean, what's the problem with
So
that?
that's something that we also need to take back to our lawyer to make sure
Okay.
that we have the capability.
If we have a permission slip from the parents that the child could be swabbed, and do the rapid test on them, that nurse would know right then and there while she's sitting there whether or not they're hot. If she swabbed them, it takes 20 minutes. Literally, that's how long it took for my grandson.
So let me ask a question, board members. As a board, we have some legitimate concerns as far as the access to rapid testing tests. What about if we send a letter as a board to Tallahassee requesting those things that we have access to urgently, requesting those things from our representatives up there in Tallahassee? I think that may
Let's send a
convey our-
letter to every rep that we've got in this area
Correct.
to go speak for us.
Correct.
And get them all on the same page, everybody that we've got that serves us at least.
I think that's a good idea, and then follow-up phone calls from each of us.
Yes. So, Attorney Green, can we draft a letter out to our representatives in Tallahassee
All of our state house and our senators.
requesting access for Marion County School District to have access to the
Rapid
rapid
testing.
testings? We have consensus with that?
She's
guys?
smiling, she's so glad that we're, her
I mean,
hands are so
it's-
tied.
It's not.
Listen, I have children too, I get it.
It's
My
not.
hands are so tied.
It's not the health department's default. They
Well,
have
we
to
know
do
that.
whatever they
We
get.
know that.
And so if we don't,
We gotta help her.
we have not because we ask not. So we need to ask. And we
Ask
need
and
to-
we shall receive, right,
There you go.
Reverend?
There you go. Preach, Stacy's preach. So yes, ma'am.
You got consensus for,
We do have consensus, guys?
Yes.
Thank you. Dr. Gullett?
Thank you, Ms. Conklin, for being here. We appreciate the time yesterday with the team and for you representing that, so
You're welcome.
we look forward to
And
getting
Ms.
some.
Conklin, we appreciate it, and we did agree on yesterday to have weekly meetings
Good.
with this. And my suggestion would be, I not be the only one go, that we rotate it, so you guys can hear, just as I heard yesterday. I think that's
Good.
the best thing that we do. So, Ms. Doris, next week you take it, it's on Wednesday. Next Wednesday at 4.
What time?
4.
4?
At the health department.
Yes.
Okay.
And then we just rotate it, guys, just make sure that everybody hit it that way. We'll know. Ms. Conklin, thank you.
You're welcome.
And
Thank
I
you very
think one of the things that we came out of the meeting, Dr. Gull and I were talking, that parents need to know, and Mr. Villanello, we talked about, there's going to be some seesaws, some ups and downs. There's some parents, you have to understand that you may have periods where your kids are not going to be in school. And that led to the other discussion that we have to be able to make sure that our online platform is jam up on when they shut down, when these kids are going home, that they can flip from traditional to online real fast.
I have a question for you. Are your children going to school?
I have one that just graduated. We live in Micanopy, so my children go to PK Young in Gainesville.
Are they going to be
But-
going back to the
My son graduated last year, and he'll be in person at Santa Fe, and my daughter is 14 at PK, and she will be going back to brick and mortar.
Okay, thank you.
You're
That's
welcome.
good information.
I just need to weigh out mental health versus physical health at this point, because she's
Right.
been home
And-
for 6 months.
Okay, thank you.
And
That's
I
why I
think
asked you that
that's-
question.
I
This is a
think
very
that's
good
the issue
recommendation
that
from
we're
you.
all
Thank you.
Dealing with our kids
Mhm.
being at home so long.
Yes, ma'am.
You're right, the mental health versus the physical health.
Yep.
That's probably the best recommendation I've heard yet. Thank you.
Yeah, but we also need to remember that every family has a different circumstance, and they're, making their own choices for their own reasons, and we need to always recognize that too, and not,
Absolutely.
The school, we do not fulfill the role of parents. We help, but we are not that role, and I just heard
Well, the parents
some
have the
conversation.
options. I mean, she
Correct.
took
Well,
her
that's what I'm
options,
just saying.
And that was interesting. I thank you for that. I didn't mean to make it into a big story,
Oh, no,
but I
that's
just
okay.
asked your,
So I would love to share with you what their scenario is, and for me as a parent, I think it's a great one and potentially an option. So one of the things that PK is doing is they're having a brick and mortar, kids that are going back to brick and mortar, but they are learning online. So your learning does not change, but
at
Your-
school.
yes, ma'am, your environment may.
So are they doing in the class? Are they doing, the teachers are in, or is there a teacher in the room, or is she?
I think there is a teacher in the room, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So just something to think about as well.
Now, how are they doing it though? They're online?
So they're online, but they are in brick and mortar. So they had 3 choices this year. They had virtual school, they could do PK online, or they could do PK brick and mortar online.
Just like we have.
But even though the teacher's there, they're still online?
Yes, ma'am.
Interesting.
Mhm.
That's what I talked to you
So then if they do have to go into quarantine, you're just taking your laptop or your Chromebook and you're at a different facility.
And I
You're-
talked
you're
to the
at home.
superintendent about that option for us about 2 months ago, a month ago.
So one of the items I'm going to bring forward is, at the work session next week, is this, because of this possible perpetual interruption of instruction, what that will look like, because we need to be sure that we're prepared for that change that can continually occur. So that will be one of the items we will take a look at what those options are next week.
And as you were saying, and Ms. King, you so eloquently said it, every family needs to look at their own situation when they're making these decisions, because everybody's family is different. I had shared, my kids aren't going to school. My grandkids aren't going to school. They're going to be out for the first 9 weeks because I have someone at my household that cannot afford to be compromised. So every family situation is different. Please look at your family situation and don't make this some cowboy thing, and just do what's best for your family. Do what's best for your family. So, but thank you, Ms. Conklin.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
So I have one other briefing. I'd like to bring Mr. Philip Leopard up so that he could provide a brief update for this very topic, preparations, and what that looks like from the aspect of preparing for the facilities, for safety, and with custodial supplies.
So many of you received emails and have forwarded them to me as well. We've talked about this before, but we are in the middle of a big supply and demand situation globally right now, as far as technology, as far as cleaning supplies, with all that. The good news is that our warehouse has the products that we need at our school sites in order to open schools successfully on the 24th. They are in process right now of delivering those items to the schools to be distributed into the classrooms, as we've discussed in the past. So we are ahead of many other entities that are not even able to get a hold of things. We've watched orders that have been placed for a long time all of a sudden dry up and get put 2 or 3 months out, but we have the supplies we need. I've been assured of that from the warehouse. We understand that they may not be in the classrooms at this very moment, but they are in transit and being prepared to be delivered and to be put in place, so we're ready to go prior to the 24th. That's the assurance that I've been given from our warehouse.
What about our face shields?
As far as I know, the face shields and the masks, we have those as well, and they're in the process of being delivered as well.
I think, Mr. Leopard, and thank you. I think the issue that we're getting is that staff are saying they've been to work for now a week and 4 days, and they have yet to get certain training. They have yet to see any of these supplies, and that creates a problem in their mindset, saying, am I safe? Am I ever going to get this stuff?
That was why we did 3 weeks. I want to be real sure that this is going on.
Here we are, 5-6 days away from the school day opening, and we're saying it's still in the warehouse. That stuff needs to be in those schools ASAP. We cannot, staff is not going to be, we need staff to be assured that when they go to work on August 24th, that they have everything in place that they need.
And know how to use it.
And know how to use it. And that's why we're getting so much pushback right now. I'm hearing it 5 or 6 times a day. Hey, you need to come by here and check this out, because this is what I got. And I know what it is. And I heard what you said, that it's in the warehouse, but it needs to be in the classroom. It needs to be at the schools.
Understood. We are working on that.
Thank you, sir.
That's all I have for the briefing.
Thank you. All right, we're going to have.
Before
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Gullett, could you kind of brief us on where we are with all the training?
Sorry?
Where we are with all the training?
Yes.
Can you give us an update?
Absolutely, yes. So the training, we are week 2. If you remember the chart that was shared from the team, we are working through those in the hybrid model. So a lot of this is just still underway. Reminder that we wouldn't expect that all the teams have been thoroughly trained, but we still have that underway, and that is moving along.
Okay,
so
it is happening.
Absolutely.
So what's a
Absolutely.
teacher's day like right now?
What is the teacher's
What's
day
a
like?
teacher's day like? They go online and they check in for these meetings, and are they all-day meetings, or what's
So
going on?
it varies from site to site. If you remember the chart, some of those are fixed training, so they might be working through teams, they might be working through the process of the scheduling for students, working with their PLCs on their grade levels. At a school yesterday, they were all coming in, so it varies, but they're following the model that was outlined that Mr. Whitehouse shared, and then they're also meeting virtually with their teams and in their schools. So, for example, they might be working on, how do I move through the day with my students? What does the lunchroom setup look like? How do we make sure they're eating? They're providing, and that varies from grade level to grade level and school to school. So there's a balance between the district level training that you saw and the school logistic training, I call it, for what does that actually look like in this building with this group of students.
Okay.
Also varies depending on how many students show up at school. So size of the classroom, how do I adapt, what are our backup plans, so they're working through all of that.
Okay, what about the teachers? I mean, I only know what I hear, that the students will be eating in their classrooms?
Varies from school to school. So school I was at yesterday, I walked the building with the principal, and she said at our site, she worked with the input of the team of her teachers, and they decided what worked for them. So in that situation, they were working through a revolving schedule, and they all agreed they wanted to do a rotation. So a teacher would get to leave, on a grade level, get to leave a day early to count for the time they're eating in the classroom. Another grade level is rotating, and they were doing rotations through the classroom depending on the size of the room. So that varies. We're allowing the schools, which is really important, to do what's right for their facility and for their students.
And that's a good idea because
Because I was concerned, well, what I was but Mr. Reverend Cummings,
Go ahead.
I need to address this with her. So, because that's what I'm hearing, is that teachers are gonna have to work through their lunch, and they're concerned about that, so they will be getting the comp time for it.
They absolutely should, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
and that's you're
Absolutely.
right. Some schools, like Mr. Leffer could tell you, some schools are not conducive to eating their meals in the classroom. For instance, there's some schools that have carpet in those classrooms. Can you imagine food and stuff hitting the carpet and hitting the floor? That's going to create a major problem for our custodial staff. So letting each school work it out for themselves
Work it out.
is ideal.
Some
As long
have
as the
outdoor
teachers are getting
tables.
comp
They
time
can
for
sit
it.
outside, and they're covered. And so every school site is different, as you know.
Because teachers have to take breaks, they have to use the restroom, so.
Absolutely.
We got that all taken care of. They're gonna get coverage somehow by somebody to take a break, and, I mean, just gotta go to the bathroom
That's
sometime.
honestly, Ms. Stacy, a great question. That's a lot of what they're working through, and we are providing that opportunity for them to do. We have to be flexible, and we have to allow that to work what's best for the staff to
I
make.
mean,
to meet
even
the
if the
needs.
receptionist from up front has to cover a classroom, then that's what she has to go do, for the teacher to be out for, 10 minutes and come back. Because I don't want the teachers to get the wrong end of the stick on this either. They need to have their breaks, and it needs to be clear that they have them.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And I like hearing your suggestion about students being able to eat outside. I know it's hot, and I've mentioned this before about, having those cooling fans. I know some schools do have them, and they enjoy sitting in a covered area and being outside. And we know that being outside is really important all the time, but even more so with mitigating this risk. And it also leads me back to the responsibility that everyone has to make brick and mortar sustainable. And I'm thinking, I know, we have our mask mandate, and I feel like our consequences were going to be pretty light, and that we're looking at, reminding and teaching and modeling so that the students understand how important this is, and that families understand that if you're going to send your child to brick and mortar, these are the expectations. But there also needs to be clarity on what happens if a student is refusing. And I know it's getting into the weeds a little bit, but I look around here and I see all the different kinds of masks. Are we going to be accepting students wearing masks with different colors, different slogans? I don't know that that's been defined yet, but it's going to happen, and as I move around the community myself, the types of masks I see at Rural King versus the types of masks I see at Publix are very different. And so I think that that's something that has to be conveyed. And again, it's in the spirit of, if we feel like the brick and mortar is important enough to have, then everyone needs to understand, from the custodians, the paraprofessionals, the students, the families, what the expectations are. And this is a life or death situation. People do die from this virus, and it got conveyed with our Code Red situation, our school shootings, that the kids understood that there's things that you just don't say anymore, on a school campus. And so to me, this is a teaching opportunity where kids need to understand, and teachers need to understand, how important this is, the modeling piece, and that everyone needs to come together and step up. And that's what's happened. That's what's helped keep our campus safe with the other situation.
I think
The see something, say something, do something. And that has to be conveyed with this, because I don't want to lose the opportunity to have brick and mortar after 2 weeks, have everything break down, have it be so chaotic that, it's just in and out, revolving door. That's no way to run things.
rapid test.
So I would rather see it really be emphasized before the doors even open, that if you are choosing, or you're choosing for your child to be back on campus, we're not playing. You know, we love you, we're compassionate, we're going to teach you the right ways, but then, by golly, you need to do it.
And to your question about coverings, face masks in particular, absolutely. Any garment, anything that a student brings on campus is part of the Code of Student Conduct. So it's an important reminder that anything that we do represents that same code. We need to be very mindful of that, absolutely.
And I was at a school yesterday and talking to staff, and one of the questions was, what do we do with this kid that comes and that refuses to wear a mask? What is it that we're going to do after we've gone through the procedures through the code of conduct? And I said we're going to follow. We're going to do the progressive discipline, you know, the things that are implemented in the code of conduct. And this teacher said, well, if they're that adamant about not wearing the mask and their parents are not going to make them wear the mask, why don't we automatically put them on the online program? And those could be options that we have to consider. We have to consider those things, because if we're going to put teeth in this program, and parents have to understand, if your kid is coming to school and they don't have an exception why they can't wear a mask, and they're just not wearing a mask just to not wear a mask, then it's a possibility, and that's something we'll discuss, that it rolls into online automatically.
And we are policymakers for the school system.
That's right.
Yes.
And so, we might need to, I don't know what we have to do legally or whatever to establish that very firm policy if we move very quickly, that this is our policy, that this is, mask will be worn, or we get signed up for online, or whatever we have to do to make it have teeth, since it is a mandate from the school board that masks be worn. You know, help us with what we need to do to put teeth in it.
I would think that in the next few days we can kind of think about some of those things.
Yeah, because kids had to learn not to say things, not to do things when it came to our violence. And kids have to learn not to say things, not to do things when it comes to this. It's not a time to be pretend sneezing on anybody.
And we know we do have the kids that are defiant. I mean, it's part of their.
Yes, we do.
Part of their little, whatever y'all call those little numbers deals, but, and if they say it's associated with their,
Disability.
you know, that you need some figuring out how to handle that.
Yep.
Well, they could just go on, I mean, you might have to go online. The option, there's the option there. But this is where the attorney's gonna have to dig deep.
Yeah, I mean, you're making me nervous telling, I don't think you can, I'll have to look at it. I'm
Yeah.
not sure you can
We just need
force
clear
kids
policy.
to do.
Yeah,
We need clearly conveyed
Well, we
policy.
wouldn't be forcing them, we would give them that, if they take the on-site option, this is the requirement for on-site option. And because they do have another option. So help us figure out,
Look at it.
yeah, help us figure out how to,
So how do we, if they have an exemption, they have to have either something from a doctor, or it has to be in their
In your
IEP?
resolution.
It's in, okay. That's what I thought. I just wanted to be
Yeah,
sure
we
that I remember.
very clearly laid out what a face covering is, what's acceptable, and then what the discipline is within that resolution.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else, Dr. Gullett?
No, just for the regular item.
You can proceed.
Ready to introduce? Okay, thank you. So I'd like to bring up Mr. Knight, who is going to provide an update of the 5-year work plan and work on the impact with the capital budget with Ms. Boston Ellis after.
And let me say this, guys, for the sake of transparency. We have to be through by 11:15 because we have an administrative work session. Attorney-client session at 11:30.
Okay.
And we don't want to be paying someone for
No,
sitting.
it's just me.
Oh, is this you?
reporter? Oh, and the court reporter, but
Yeah,
she
we-
pays for them, yeah. But there's not another lawyer, it's just me.
Would we be paying the court reporter, right?
It's a per diem for her to be here,
Okay.
so.
Okay.
But you're welcome to be done at 11:30 if you want.
Okay. Okay. So for our next presentations, y'all kind of understand we're on the time.
Good morning. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Knight.
I'll continue on with that. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the board. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to you, Mrs. Martinez-Lopez, Mrs. Green, and Dr. Gullett. Last month I gave you an overview of the projects and funding. I'm going to cover that very briefly and cover the student station portion of that. So first, just to recap, last month our millage increased by roughly $2 million over the last projection the previous year. Our debt is relatively unchanged except for projects that have been updated. Same with rollovers. We have a number of funded projects, air conditioning, roofing, cafeterias, art, music rooms, and that includes any work at MTI. Print is small, but the only thing that's really changed on the funding and capital expenditures is the fact that as we paid bills for June, those numbers were updated. We didn't have those updated numbers in July, so the rollover amounts have gone down as we paid off bills. So that leaves us with all our revenue and pre-expenses with $38,102,139 for this year. And how it's distributed is there's a lot of yellow, which means a lot of projects that are not funded. Those are predominantly HVAC or heating, ventilating, and air conditioning projects. Most of the projects that are funded are also heating, ventilating, and air conditioning projects. And it's the same on the second page of the maintenance and repairs. This is capital outlay student stations, which there are no capital outlay student station projects. It is a line item in the work program that we will have to report, even if it's to say there aren't any projects that fit that mold. And that brings us to the second piece of projects. That's the capital outlay non-student stations. There's a lot of yellow there. Most of what's not funded is full-blown remodeling and renovation projects, and there are a few. This is where the cafeterias, this is where the art and music rooms lie. They are non-student station related projects.
Mr. Knight, may I ask you, going back to the capital outlay student stations? And this is a 5-year plan, correct?
Right, correct.
What happened to the replacement? We talked about a replacement school, beginning to look at that for Lake Weir Middle, and then also moving MTI over to MTC. And where is that in the 5-year plan?
Well, right now it's non-existent because we can only show what's in our current survey. Our current survey does not reflect closing any schools, and it does not reflect a replacement. So what will happen is next year in June 2021, our next survey is due. We'll be coming to the board for those items that go in that survey, which would impact the 5-year work program. Now, if the board wanted to do it before the survey, it could. We would have to amend the current survey in order to allow us to even show it in the 5-year work program.
I think it's so important, and it was a priority to this board. I just don't want it to get shoved in a corner. I think it's important that we keep it out in the forefront, that when we can move forward with it, we can move forward.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I would like to thank Ms. McCall for bringing that up. I won't be here to help push it, and so I hope that the board will do like Ms. McCall asked and keep this on the hot burner, because this has been hanging for a long time for Lake Weir. I know we had an administrator that had to have all the mold and everything removed back when Mr. Ellers was over there, and I could imagine if he had to do that for his office, the rest of the school's in the same shape. And so it's just time, and the transportation that we're blowing, because we're taking, since the majority of the students are coming from a whole different area and being transported into Lake Weir Middle, it's you got costs going on there that's just ongoing and continual. And there comes a time where, it's been in the plan for so long. We bought the land, we've acquired the site, which took a very long time, and it's time to really get serious about that school.
I just don't want to forget about it. And if next year's survey, we can put it in there, I'm fine with that. I just don't want to forget about either of those projects.
Yeah, I would suggest that unless the board's going to spend any funds before the survey, amending the current survey would take probably about 4 months to go through the process with the state, come back through the board, and then final submit to the state. So unless the board wanted to spend dollars in the 2021 school year, I would recommend that you put it in the very next survey, since it will be something the board has to approve prior to.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Just as long as everybody remembers that those kids, they matter too. Those kids matter too.
Okay, point well taken. I'll take care of that. Okay, so last page is capital non-student station projects, more the same, mostly remodeling renovation projects that are not funded. There are several, including the 3 cafeterias in this 5-year work program, and also several art and music suites. So the summary on funding is that our entire 5-year work program is worth $428,228,912, $102,738,821 of which is funded, which is about 19% of our overall 5-year work program. So in conclusion, all revenue is got a home. Only 19% of the work program is funded, which leaves 81% not. State revenue sources are primarily capital outlay debt service funds. We don't have any current referendums providing any additional funding beyond the millage. And we do have some restricted funds, but they are restricted, and it's only $4 million. And our growth as far as millage appears to be about 2% a year is the projection. And so that would allow us to have discussion on future capital funding sources. So now I'll hit the overview of student stations and capacities. All of our student stations are brick and mortar and portable seats combined, and you can only alter the sort of the question we just talked about. You can only alter student stations through a school plant survey. So even if we closed a school and moved those stations because it's moved, we could only alter them through a school plant survey. Our capacities of a school are 100% of your seats at elementary are counted, only 90% at middle school, and for the most part, high school is 95%, but it actually depends on how many student stations you have. For instance, MTI is at 75% of their seats count towards your capacity. And our full-time equivalency numbers come from the state, and they will be the ones projecting 5 years out. So there are 2 quick slides concerning student station capacities. From left to right, you have the schools alphabetically. Then we break down brick and mortar capacity, the portables, the overall student stations at each school, and the actual capacity at each school in that light orange color. In the middle of the page, you see something at the top says unofficial. These are the actual capital outlay full-time equivalency numbers from the state. They have not released them yet. They will probably not release them until the entire work program form is released. If you recall last year, that didn't happen until October. So we're doing our best guess based on the numbers that we have locally in the district. And then moving left to right, also you have number of classrooms, or class size, or utilization, and our overall utilization in terms of percentage. 2/3 to the right, you have new student capacity. They are all negative figures. That's because after 20 years, portables lose their student station seats. It doesn't mean you can't use them as a classroom, but those seats no longer count. And even more importantly, the state stops funding you for your portables. So any repairs, any upkeep, the actual operation of it is on the district's back. State does not kick in any funding at all when a portable turns 20 years old. By 5 years from now, all our portables will be at least 20 years old. And so we're losing 1,338 seats on paper. Doesn't mean, again, that we can't use those portables, but they do not count towards the maintenance and operations funds. And so what that really means is if you go to the far right under the projected utilization, some schools that are just under 100% capacity, like Bellevue High School, will be over 100% capacity on paper because they lost the seats in the portables. Several schools, though, such as College Park Elementary, if you will flip to the next page, schools like Saddlewood or Westport High are already at capacity or higher and will remain so. There are several schools that will be under 75% capacity. They're all elementary except I think Fort McCoy is one. And on the second page, we're at Collier, and on the first page, also Evergreen Elementary and Dunella Middle School will be under 75% projected. And again, those figures come from the state. So in summary, what that means is all our portables will lose their capacity in 5 years. Any schools that have a capacity issue now will most likely continue to have a capacity issue. And new student growth, according to the state, is approximately 1,000 students in the next 5 years distributed among elementary, middle, and high school. Even with the loss of the seats and portables, that'll mean our empty capacity stations will be about 3,894 by year 5. And what we do about it is you look at the program management or the redistricting. Obviously, if there's a very popular program at one school only and everybody tries to go there, it would empty out seats at other schools and overgrow that particular school. So that's something we'll definitely have to keep an eye on. Program management is probably I want to say it's easy because it's never easy to move programs around, but that and redistricting are your 2 least costly options in terms of a facilities cost. And again, if you go to build wings, just know that A, we would need the fund source, and B, we would need a recommendation. And what the state does is if they see empty seats in the north end, they won't let you build seats in the east end until you fill them. It's a math game at that point. So that is a quick run through. Certainly happy to answer any questions you may have on the capital program. Just a footnote, again, the state has not released a form. They get later and later each year. This data will not change except for the FTE numbers will be official in the work program the board will vote on. And if there's any change on the capital budget side, it would only be a last bill coming in that might impact a rollover project. But I believe all those things have been taken care of.
So, Mr. Knight, this is kind of forward thinking. If distance learning becomes the norm, where we have, which I think probably we will look at something down the road, because a lot of our students are enjoying that distance learning and doing well. So it may be a learning option down the road. That will certainly have an impact on those seats. If let's say we continue to have 30% of our students, if we continue to have that option. So that will have an impact on those seats, correct?
Yes, I believe the impact will be twofold. First, the question remains, and maybe it's already been answered, does the district get funds for those students? They are learning through the school system. They may not be sitting in a chair.
Correct.
But what happens to the funding? Because that's vital for paying for the teacher salaries and the actual buildings
I
that
think
the board
as
owns.
long as, they would still get the FTE because they're learning through us. It's just that they would be learning in a different way and not in a brick and mortar classroom.
Yes.
So
It definitely affects capacity.
And I think,
You'd have more seats in the space physically to spread out.
Yeah.
Would be the other impact, which would certainly not be a negative.
would not be a negative.
May change how many students a teacher is teaching at one time. Maybe you're down to 10 or 8 instead of a traditional 20 or 21. But if you did branch out, then obviously those teachers would teach the kids that spread into other classrooms, I would imagine.
How would it affect funding if we've got 30% of our students that are distance learning and not brick and mortar? How will it affect capital funding?
Well, the challenge is whether you have 10 kids in a classroom or 100 kids in a classroom, you still have to run the lights, the air, you still have to clean the room thoroughly. You can't skip desks because maybe nobody sat there that hour. So you still have the same impact cost-wise as far as operation. If you're going to run the chill water plant, you're going to run the chill water plant for the school. You can't pick and choose which rooms to turn on and not turn on. It's not how those systems are set up. So the operation cost would definitely not come down because you have less kids in unless you closed a whole wing or a whole school down to any activity. That'd be the only way to really impact the operations cost. From a construction or standpoint, what it would mean is possibly you get a little more life out of your systems if they're not as strained as fully open school. But 30%, I would doubt it would impact the system enough to say we don't need to replace the air for 5 more years because we have 100 less kids in the school. If it's on its last legs, it's on its last legs. So I would say that there would be very little impact unless you actually close a whole building or a whole school system, or a whole school campus, rather.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It would affect our transportation costs, though.
Right.
Yes.
Right, for sure. I'm noticing some interesting comparisons between our Bellevue schools and our Dunellen schools. For example, Bellevue Santos is at 76%, and then Bellevue Middle is at 94%, and Bellevue High is at 101%, and Dunellen kind of the same thing. Dunellen Elementary is at 100, Dunellen Middle is at 63, and then it jumps back up to Dunellen High at 108.
Some of that is impacted by where the state sees the numbers. So there's sometimes a bubble that moves through the student population. You get a large group of elementary kids, and behind them there's less elementary kids entering. So that bubble moves in the middle and then eventually moves into high school. And with only 1,000 students projected 5 years out, distributed amongst K through 12, the numbers didn't come up very much from last year's projection. And what you're seeing is a combination of some portables losing their seats, where like Dunellen Elementary School, for instance, it's at 86% overall utilization now, or projected in 2021, and it jumps to 100. But we lost 72 seats in portables, which makes it look like, my gosh, what are we going to do? There's going to
But
be
you
kids
still
in the
have the
parking lot.
portables there.
Well, the portables are there. What happens is they lose their
Just lose
seats
their count.
after 20 years, and so the state says, well, you don't have any seats, you don't get any money. But we're still going to have students in those portables learning. And so it is skewing, because we're losing seats at certain schools, it is skewing the percentage utilization. So it's something definitely to be aware of. Same thing if you look at Bellevue Middle School, they lose 176 seats in portables, and it puts them at 94% utilization. Now, what could impact a school that has nothing to do with seats that are lost or gained? Programming. You know, like I said, Westport High is very popular because it has the early college, it has the arts and music. I don't believe there's another high school that has near as in-depth in art and music. So if you want to study art and music, you're trying to get into Westport. If you want to learn electronics, you're looking at Forest High, or same thing if you're looking at culinary. So sometimes the programming can cause shifts in student population because of the desired program. But with the loss of seats this year, it is an anomaly, because 5 years out, you look at the projections and say, gee, look at all the yellow. Last year there was only maybe 5 or 6 schools that were over projection. And so there's another 4 or 5 added to that list because of the loss of seats. So I don't know if that answers your question, Mrs. Thrower, at all, but it's a mixed bag, I guess, of answers in that case.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure.
So, Mr. Knight, so you said within 5 years, some of these portables are going to be not counted?
Yes, they will lose their student seat designation by the state at year 20. And so what that really
And
means
lose
in terms
funding.
of impact is it'll look like we need even more space than we actually need. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because you can tell the state we've done everything we could possibly do. We've lost the seats. And so maybe you need to start paying attention to some of the capital needs in the district, because it's not only classroom space, it's the age of the existing classroom space as well. If we don't have money to keep that sustained, obviously we're not going to have enough to build new.
So we'll lose funding for the maintenance of those?
Of the portables, yes.
How much maintenance do we get each year for a portable?
I don't know the actual figure per portable. I know there is a breakdown. It's, you know, something like 20 cents a square foot for cleaning and another 35 cents a square foot for maintenance. And so it's several $100,000. We have about 500 portables. Not all of them have seats in them now. So we'd have to come back and see if we can get the actual figure from the state. They're usually a year behind telling us, unless finance department has some of that information.
I'd be curious what we're losing, like, as we lose the portables, like what kind of funding are we losing actually in dollars and cents?
I mean, I don't think we're losing $20 million, but I don't think we're losing 5 or 10,000 either.
Okay, because it seems like after their life is out, they become a liability to our
They
budget.
do. It's actually in the statute that it says literally, we highly recommend that districts get rid of their portables after year 20. So that's their way of saying, well, if you want to keep them, you can, but we're not going to help you sustain them. So they haven't mandated. Years ago, about 18, 19 years ago, the state actually required we get rid of them at 20 years. And bigger districts like Miami-Dade, they have 5,000 portables. And they said, not happening unless you kick in a bunch of money to build 30 new schools. So they retreated and changed the language to say highly recommended. And then the way they get to the district is they just stop funding you. And that's their way of encouraging you to get rid. But it's impossible, because obviously kids move around, and you can't just build a wing and then take that wing and move it somewhere else when the population shifts. So that's why portables exist.
Gotcha.
Anyway.
Good job, Mr. Knight.
Okay, thank you.
Break.
We have,
What comment?
Bishop's
Public comment too.
I'm
opening on reopening schools, so I don't know if you wanted to take any
Okay,
more.
I'm sorry. We did have a public comment
I was
from
gonna say.
Mr. Stockton. Elena's telling me, so we're gonna go ahead and take his comment, and then we'll do we're gonna do a break right after his comments, and then we'll close out with Ms. Teresa Barcelos.
Is he gonna bring up the,
We still have to do Osceola.
Oh, Mr. Mr. Knight, that's right, he has to come back and do Osceola as well.
Ms. Boswell,
Come on,
and
Bishop.
Mr. Knight to talk about the cafeteria update.
I'm sorry, she had comment on school reopenings. I'm sorry.
Good afternoon.
Morning.
Still morning.
Morning, okay, all right. Well, it's a pleasure to, and I thank you for allowing me to share with you. I think in my first couple meetings, I always said that I want to be a person in the community that allows us to be proactive instead of reactive. And listening with everything that is going on, the NAACP has created an initiative. You'll forgive me, I can't breathe. It's hard for me to breathe.
Why don't you take it off?
Uh,
I mean, you're far away from everybody.
So one of the things that we wanted to do is kind of give an update on our initiative that we kind of talked about in our last planning session, and that is creating what we've coined now as virtual learning camps. You're hearing around the country about bubbles and things of that nature, and parents are paying top dollars and things of that nature for their children to go into smaller, safe environments for instead of going back to brick and mortar. Again, we are not trying to be teachers. We're not. We want to walk with the teachers and the brick and mortar system and give those that are online an option to have a place for their children to be safe. We also kind of see it as a model because we understand that anything can happen at any kind of time, so we want to develop that. And so today I really wanted to just kind of give an update of where we are with our virtual learning centers. We have camps. We have about 15 already identified and ready to begin the process. We have capped it where we're not taking any more than 20 to 25 kids, regardless of the size of your location, because we want to make sure that we do all the social distancing, and we're going to do temperature checks. We've created paperwork and documentation that we can share, whether it's temperatures to sign in, parents having to come to the door to sign them in. They can't just pull up, drop them off, and run. We have to have people to pick them up. They have to be listed. Our volunteer monitors is what they're being called. They're training now and watching YouTube videos on the meetings and the classroom. But what we're here today is that we really would like to have permission or access to maybe talk to Mr. Vianello to kind of make sure that we are checking boxes, not to develop any kind of serious relationship that would cause us any kind of things, but to make sure that we're checking boxes. And we have some asks that we would like to have answered. We have parents who are excited, and we just want to make sure that we're doing all that we can do with our due diligence to create an assistance to what is happening out there, because we do know that we're talking about 15,000 kids that are going to be online. Now, I wish we had space for all 15,000, but we also know that we have some parents who have to work and they got needs and things of that nature, so we want to create safe environments. So that's my 3 minutes. And so that's really what we're asking for today, is we could have access to possibly have communications with the task force to kind of make sure that we've dotted I's and crossed T's.
Thank you, Bishop. Board members?
I think what you're doing is, I think you're setting an example for the country by doing this in Marion County. This could be something that could just go, get the faith community involved again. And you're not just doing this, Mr. Bishop, for us. You are doing this for the country. You are incredibly proactive. And I could not thank you more for the energy that you're putting into this. And I say, anything that the attorney says we can legally do and give you information on, I say, the sky's the limit as far as I'm concerned. Thank you, but just thank you a million times over for having a place for our online children to go to be safe, because that's been my biggest concern, is especially these elementary kids on the streets. And you're after my heart on this one. Thanks.
And so I will guess Dr. Gullett, Mr. Villanello would probably, and probably Suzanne may need to just have a conversation with Bishop Stockton and some of the other guys that are involved. I know we met Monday. I think there were a lot of pastors that showed up to help with this option, and there are some. It has to be some for it to work effectively. It has to be some collaboration with the school district. They're not asking the school district for anything other than what you're already going to give the kids, Chromebook. That's already going to be there. Those kids are already getting those things, so I'm sure they'll convey the issues and things that they're going to need from the district.
So is that consensus for from the board for me and Mr. Vianello to meet? Is that what?
If the board is
I'm fine with that. I just want to be real sure that the district is not going to be responsible other than the Chromebooks. I know we'll have the grab-and-go meals or somehow the meals that are children that are distance learning. I don't want to get into any other expenses. I don't want this to be a school district initiative. I want it to be a community initiative. And I want us to be very, very careful about how we are involved in this, because I don't want it to look like that this is a school district initiative at these different faith-based. I think it's a fabulous idea, but I think we really have to be very careful about what they're asking of us and what we actually can do.
I agree, because we can't assume the people that are there, you know, all of that. So.
But I think he's made it very, very clear that it's all the parents' choice. And that's what I like about it. The parents choose this, and the parents go there, and that's their choice.
Parents have chosen distance learning.
No, but I mean, they choose to go there for their distance learning. And if that's where they want to do it, then I don't see how there's any problem with them doing it here versus there. It's up to the parents.
And it goes back to, and I could say it because I know my church is one of the churches that is involved.
You know, before we move forward, and I meant to bring this up today, should he pass the gavel at this point since he's involved in this part, or is it okay? I just wondered. I know there's been times where I've had to pass it.
That's when I think y'all are voting on it.
Okay, so that's just then. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that because he's involved in part of it, that it wasn't. Okay, thank you.
Because it goes back to when we did the Saturday school thing. The district was not necessarily involved with it. They just asked for volunteers. So I think, and as Beth has said, Ms. McCall said, it is a community initiative. It's not a school district initiative. Just because I happen to be on the board, it just looks a little different. But it is a community initiative. So. And we don't want the district to be tied up into something that it can't.
And on that point, Chair Cummings, I do think if y'all do move forward with it, that would be a pass the gavel kind
That would be when we voted. If we had, it shouldn't be anything that we would have to vote on, would it?
No.
I don't have any idea.
If we have to vote
if we have to vote on it, then
I
it's
don't
a
think we
school
have to
issue.
There's no vote on
There's
this.
no vote on anything.
This is just him sharing information with us
Correct.
about what they are going to provide to help our children that choose distance learning.
This is no different than homeschool parents contacting them and finding out what they
Correct.
need.
Correct.
It's no different.
I say thank you so much for the
Absolutely.
community involvement and for the community initiative. That's what this takes. So thank you for providing that leadership. Hopefully others will emulate your example. I know there's probably plenty of parents that are coming together and taking some of their kids and some other kids and, you know, based on everyone's work schedules and so on. And that's that kind of creativity that we need and the support that we need. Thank you.
We need some, and these kind of stories, these great stories where the community comes forward. We're always asking the community to come forward, but our newspapers, I guess, somewhat defunct or whatever. I don't know what's going on there. That we can't get it out in the press. What a great job you're doing, because I think this will be a great community story for Mr. Rogers or somebody to do. Just a great community story that we could share on Facebook, on wherever we want to share the story, for maybe other people to join in, other faith organizations, or not just faith organization, but even a business. Maybe Miss Green's husband had a room and 10 kids in the neighborhood wanted to use a room in that office, and they had somebody, I mean, just for individuals to be able to work together to keep our kids safe during this time.
I do think it's a great idea, but I am curious to see where it will head. So if it could be churches now, but what if it is a home and
That
it is a
doesn't matter.
parent that has a home? I mean, are we going to open
No.
that up for all? And I'm just throwing
It's
that
not
out.
it's the parents' choice where they go. If I wanted to have 5 kids come to my house to do virtual learning, and the parents brought them to me, and I wanted to do it, I could do it. There's nothing to
That's
stop us.
That's not what I'm saying.
What do you mean?
I'm saying if we, because I think the question is the hot spots and stuff. So what I'm saying, what we do for one, we're gonna have to do it for all. And I just want us to make sure that we're forward thinking that we can provide that for all. That's what I'm saying. I agree. Every parent, they know their children and knows what's best. But I'm just thinking for the school district side, if we do for one, we're gonna have to do for
That's
all.
what you're-
And that, are we prepared? Can we do that? And that's all I'm saying.
But we are doing hotspots.
And I think, you're
For
right.
everybody we
I
can.
think what we've already identified that they're gonna have to provide hotspots and Chromebooks to those kids. And I think with groups like this, you'll have to provide less hotspots. So it's gonna help the district. I see it as a win situation for everybody. So, thank you, guys. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and then when we come back, it's Ms. Boston Ellis and Mr. Knight run the table to 11:15, 11:20. back on at 10:41. Reconvene our work session. We're going to hear from Ms. Teresa Boston Ellis, our Chief Financial Officer.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Probably feel like you've been sitting here all day. But what we would like to do is to continue the budget discussion. And because the time is limited, just want to point out to you that we have responded to your questions. 2 yellow headings. One says a response to the questions you asked last week. And then the second one are handouts for the presentation today.
You said we got them, or you're sending them?
You have them.
Right here?
Should be behind tab 7.
They were put in there.
Put in your book.
Behind tab
They're in
7.
there.
Tab 7.
They look like this, Mrs. Stacy. Go behind tab
Even
7.
your mask is classy.
Oh, thank you.
This is one of
Okay, so are we ready? We'll start with page 2. Just remind
that orange stuff behind. Okay, is this it?
Began 7.
Okay, now found it. Thank you.
Okay. I'm not going to go over those because of the time limitation, but if it's not clear, please feel free to give me a call.
Okay.
The tentative budget, just to remind you again, is $652 million. Today we will be discussing all of the items past the general fund, food service, federal grants, debt service, capital projects, and the internal service fund.
I think we're.
These funds total
I think I'm lost.
This is behind tab 4.
4. The presentation is behind tab 4.
Okay, somehow all of us up here missed that.
Okay, tab 4.
Okay, behind that.
Are you there?
So we're on page 3 behind tab 4. Good? Okay.
Thank you.
Again, the total budget is $652 million. Today we'll be discussing all of the other funds that were not discussed last week. So it's food service, federal programs, debt service, capital, and internal service fund. These represent $213.2 million, and it's about 33% of our entire budget. You've spent some time talking to Robert about the 5-year plan, so we can move quickly through that. On page 5 is a slide that shows you the total projected revenue of $208.6 million over the 5-year period and total expenditures of $553.9 million. That tells you we have a deficit of almost $350 million in our 5-year plan. I looked back last year and it was about $353 million. Our revenue estimates were the current year's projected revenue, and we reflected a 2% increase in revenue for every year. Most of our expenditures are considered as remodeling and renovation, about 73% of it, and that's the HVAC, the electricity, and then some remodeling and maintenance of our schools. And the debt is the next highest one, and that represents about 11% of the total budget. Again, as a reminder, we levy the max, 1.5 mils for the capital. Our property values increased 8.14%, and the 1.5 mil is set by the legislators. You could do lower, but not higher. On page 7, it tells you how much revenue that 1.5 mil generates. That's $32.6 million. It's a $2.5 million increase over last year. On slide 8, this is just to give you a reflection. Some of you may remember we were able to levy 2 mills back in 2007-8. From 2007-8 year, the millage rate started going down. It was 1.75 in the 8-9 year, and the remaining years are at 1.5 mil. So this shows you that in these 13 years, there's a potential loss of revenue of $109 million. I think that's significant when we talk about all of the projects that we need to take care of for our district. The next is a list of the funded projects in the 5-year plan. If you'll follow me all the way to page 12, that's where the summary is. Most of these items are HVAC, re-roof, and so the total funded projects in the 5-year plan are $204.3 billion. That's at the bottom of page 12. And then when we look at unfunded projects in the 5-year plan, the next 5 pages will give you descriptions of all of those projects. So if you'll move to page 17, that's where the total is. So in the 5-year plan, we have a total of, again, $350 million worth of projects that are not funded currently. So let's move to the 2021 budget for capital projects. We're not required by law to have the 5-year plan fully funded, but we are required by law to fund the current year, 2021 budget. So our estimated revenues, excluding fund balance, is $34.2 million. The beginning fund balance is $30.7 million. Total expenditures, excluding fund balance, is $60.6 million. As you can see, the majority of the revenue comes from the 1.5 mil. We have a small amount coming from CONDS, and those were revenues that were bonded with the motor vehicle tax many years ago. And then charter schools, $289,000. The expenditures, again, the majority of them are remodeling and renovations. There's debt. There's a maintenance transfer from capital projects to cover our maintenance expenses, and then a small amount of dollars for new construction. Capital projects revenue sources, as you can see, there's 6 columns. The first column is the funding source, the beginning fund balance, the budgeted revenues, the budgeted expenditures, and then whatever the projected ending fund balance is. And then it tells you restricted for certain purposes. The CONDS funds are restricted for HVAC and electrical in the budgeted. And then the local property is various projects. The PICO charter schools, of course, that is the dollars that are provided to us, and we transfer it to the general fund, and then it's paid out to the charter schools. The sales tax, $1.7 million, that is that generator at Liberty Middle that is being installed. And then $35,000 is a bus lift that was purchased to help service the new buses that you approved last year. This is a partial payment of that. And then we have other capital projects. If you recall, we're still implementing last year's security grant for school safety improvements. We're still adding fences to schools. Slide 21 is just giving you a picture of the PICO funds. I'm sure you all are very familiar with the fact that most of PICO dollars are generated through the gross receipts tax, and that has been going down for many years as we switch our communication from landlines to cell phones. So there is a huge need to look for another funding source for PICO maintenance. We have not received any funds for the last 2 years. All of the K-12 funding goes to the charter schools. This year, the charter schools are getting $169.6 million.
Across the state.
Yes, ma'am.
How about our schools?
Our charter schools, I believe it's about 200,000. 289,000.
Nellis, please know that every time we talk to legislators, we talk about this, and they understand that there's a need, but nobody has an answer on how to fund it. So I don't know that it'll that that'll change.
If it'll change this year or not. I don't see it changing.
I don't think it's ever going to change.
Then we will definitely have to explore other funding
Yep.
sources to meet the needs of our old and aging buildings.
Well, and I think when we look at the millage and how much we lose in that, I think that chart is very telling and one that we can show. And then when they see all of the unfunded capital that we have a great story to tell. And I think giving them some of these charts, I don't know that it'll help, but at least they'll have the information.
I think we need to keep asking.
We will always ask.
Yes.
The next slide is just reminding you about impact fees that were implemented in 2006. We did collect for a few years, but the board, based on the lack of growth in our community as defined by the impact fee law, the board elected to first suspend, and I believe last year we looked at just,
Continue.
yes. And the next slide will just show you the,
Continued the suspension.
I think Mr. Hurley, he found out we still will have to continue sending the letter every year asking to suspend. So the impact fees over the time period that we collected, and of course interest, was $12.04 million. And then you can see on the right side the expenditures associated with the funds that were collected. I would say 6.9 is for additions that were at Emerald Shores and Waimea Park. Another $3.5 million was land purchases for future growth. And then about $500,000 was for a refund to Stonecrest because they are a restricted community. A review of our sales tax collection. We did have a voter-approved sales tax, 2004, and it ended 5 years later on 2009. And at that time, due to the economy, I believe the board approved not asking for an extension from the community. We did collect $111 million. And as you can see, there were several schools that were funded in total or partial. We still have 2 schools on the resolution left that we did not have adequate funding to build. And at that time, it was called Middle School DD. I believe that's the Lake Weir Middle. And then another elementary school that was not survey recommended. But we could do it using sales tax if we had continued the sales tax revenue. It does have a fund balance of $4.3 million, and those funds will stay there unless there is something like Liberty Middle, where an expenditure can be associated with one of the schools that was approved through the sales tax. Again, looking at the capital projects for the year 2021, anything in blue are brand new projects. So if you'll turn to page 26, that's the total. The new projects include Donnell in the Middle, HVAC, Fort McCoy, Hillcrest, MTI, the Northwest Transfer, the bus compound, Saddlewood, and Bellevue Santos, various projects totaling $60.6 million. Debt service, page 28. Basically, we have to set up a debt service fund for accounting purposes, and the majority of the funds that get in this are transferred from the capital projects fund. So $13.6 million was transferred from capital to pay for our debt. As you can see, there's small other revenue from state and local. The expenditures include principal and interest payment for the year 2021 and a small amount for fees associated with these payments. Again, looking at the revenue source, the entire fund is $14.1 million. Again, the state revenue is from the motor vehicles tax, and then also parimutuel racing commission funds. Reflecting again on what we pay out of the debt service fund, a total of $14 million. As you can see at the bottom, there's some Kobe, and then the certificate of participation is where we did the major purchases of wings of different school buildings, revenue bonds, and then, of course, last year, the lease purchase agreement for buses. On slide 31, it gives you a look on the outstanding debt as of June 30th. The first column is the original issue amount of the remaining debt. That total is $122.7 million. And the next column will give you the final payout. Following that is the outstanding principal and interest. And then also the far two columns tells you the revenue source and also what project those dollars supported. Just as a note of interest, we will pay off about $26,000 in debt January 21. In the year 23, another $11.1 million, 25, $20.5 million, 27, $29.3 million, 29, $16.4 million, and in 2031, we will pay off $2.4 million. So the total debt, including principal and interest payment, is $79.7 million. There are also rules associated with our debt capacity, and what the statute says is that we can levy or we can use up to 75% of our capital outlay millage for debt payments on lease purchase agreements, such as the COPs. And so our debt capacity right now is 41.6%, which is lower, and which is a good thing. We already pay a lot of our dollars out of capital on debt. When we talk about our debt payments, we need to talk about the credit rating agencies. When we go into debt, we have to agree that every year credit rating agencies will do what they call our surveillance. They come through and they ask us a lot of questions about our fund balance, about our capital plan, about the funds we're spending on salary, and if we're able to weather the storms. And we've already gone through that with Moody, and our rating maintained the same as it was last year. Today, Allison Latoya and I will be on a phone with Fitch, which is the second rating agency, and we will be having a similar discussion with them. That's important in case we want to do any more long-term borrowing. That'll impact whatever our interest rate will be. So let's move on to food service.
So out of curiosity, when you say where we are with our percentage, our 40-something percent, so what are we looking at in dollars? Like, what's available?
I had that. I just didn't know if you wanted to know that.
You know I
Yeah. So we could levy up to 75% of the current year's revenue, which is $32.6 million. So we could levy or pay the debt $24.4 million. So we could do that. But keep in mind, every dollar we spend on debt, then Robert can't do the projects he needs. And so our principal payment of 13.6% represents that 41%. So we're well below that allowable.
But I'm thinking about at the point in time that we might need to finance a school,
Yes.
like what we would have available.
When we're doing a lease purchase, we can, right now, this, as the statute stands,
I'm talking about like COP, COPs or something.
that's what that is.
Okay.
Yes. And you're absolutely correct, Ms. Stacy. If we raise that level, then that will impact other projects that are currently being paid out of capital. So it would be impactful.
Okay.
What's good about where we are is I think it was in 10-11 or 11-12, when the property values started going down. There were school districts that got in trouble because the values were going down. Then they were over that 75%.
Yep.
And it was some tough times. And I recall Brevard was one of those that had a lot of problems. So our financial advisors tell us this is a good place to be.
Okay.
But there is a delicate balance between, what we are comfortable with as debt versus what we could do.
Needs, too.
Yes.
Like what our needs. Okay, thanks.
So Ms. Johnson created her budget back in March, which was pre-COVID. And so her budget for 2021 looks a lot like the 1920 budget. She had some slight increases due to additional, I think we'll get an increase in our rates of reimbursement. But I want to caution us about the food service, and not to alarm anyone, but remembering that there were some things that happened, and I want to share some numbers with you. There was a statewide assessment of food service programs, and I asked Ms. Johnson to give me the impact for Marion County, what that looked like. We had a decrease in meal claims of like 1.8 million. You can kind of think about that. It's a lot of meals to lose between March and May. The estimated loss in federal reimbursement for Marion County was $4.3 million. And the estimated impact to the district fund balance, as you can see on slide 36, at tentative budget, it was $3.2 million operational loss. And Mrs. Gary told me a couple of days ago that they've received some additional revenue for the month of May and June. So now their operational loss is down to about $2.2 million. And you might ask, how could that happen? Because we were still feeding kids, but not as many as if they were the captive audience. And that's why I said I want to caution you about, we're going to have to monitor the revenue streams and monitor the expenditures of food service this year. And she started out, she's looked at possible places to cut costs. But what has saved us is because, remember her excess fund balance? That we gotten written up a couple of years, several years, that we had too much in fund balance. But that is what carried us through these 3-4 months.
Good.
But we will be dealing with fewer students.
Right.
We'll be dealing with fewer students. We will have the kids who are in brick and mortar. That's a captive audience. But the curbside is for our MCPS online. So we've got to work really hard to try to amp that program up. I believe someone stated earlier, all the food service managers are working with the principals and the administration of each school. Their food delivery will look different at every school. And she told me yesterday they are actually practicing, so they can be timely in delivering meals to classes that need them, so that they can timely serve the students as they come through the line if they are going to eat at the classrooms. And then, of course, cleaning up afterwards. So they've got a very, very tight schedule, and they're having to realign their way of work to meet the needs. So again, her budget is based on the best scenario. The only thing I want to bring to your attention is in your handouts, and you can look later. I've showed you where the rates have gone up. You can see where the federal reimbursement rates have gone up. And then she also provided a little brochure about the program, the 1920 year, as well as some of the things they're doing for 2021. And with the help of Mr. Christian, we were able to get that for you today. And that's in the handouts for today. You can look at that later. I do want to go to page 42, and just to let you know that food service employs 518 employees. There are They range from cafeteria monitors, I believe there's 2 at every school. They have food service managers and workers, 331 workers, 48 managers, and her district staff is about 17. They range from funding and accountant 1 in finance, and also she funds different positions throughout the district that they use a lot. So they're funding one of the technology employees because he has to be on call for all of the different schools, food services, even down to a warehouse courier driver, which ensures that all of their supplies are delivered to them daily. So we're talking 518 employees. The only other thing, well, maybe there's 2 more things I want to bring to your attention. And on slide 44, I just want you to know that food service does provide some of the, they cover some of the costs as it relates to energy, utilities, garbage pickup, a portion of those charges at that school they pick up. They do, on page slide 45, where it says supplies, 4,700, that's the food costs. So as you can see, this year they had or 1920 they budgeted $13 million and actually spent $9.4 million for food, and they are budgeting $12.4 million. That's it. And on slide 49, their estimated fund balance will be $5.5 million, and that might be a little too high. But we are sure we will not get accused of having too much money at the end of the year in food service.
Well, there's that. That was a strange accusation.
Yeah.
So let's move on to Special Revenue Fund Other. That's all of our grants, federal, state, and local. As you know, grants should supplement our instructional dollars. So these dollars are supposed to supplement what we are doing instructionally. And 98% of the funds that we get are from the federal or federal through state. On the expenditure side, 56% or $34.3 million is for salaries and benefits. If you look at the historical grant funds, you'll see a reduction in expenditures from the 18-19 year to the 19-20 year. And most of that was because of COVID. And please know that any dollars that are not spent in the grants, they have to be rolled over until the next year. Also in your attachments is a list of every grant that we have and a description for your reading at a later time. That's in your attachment. On slide 53 and 54 is a list of all of the grants. And as I said, there's another attachment that'll give you a description of each one of the grants. And they total $61 million. That's a little higher than what we normally have. And I'd like to point out to you that on page 54, we have all of the CARES money. So between the CARES grants for the K-12 and the adult education program, together it's about $15.5 million. On slide 55, the increase in revenue, the $18 million, again, that's due to the CARES grant for the most part. And you'll see that reflected on slide 57, the EDU Stabilization Fund K-12. That's the official name of $15 million.
And that's non-recurring, correct?
Yes, that grant is supposed to be for 2 years, the big one, the $13 million, and we've pretty much spent the majority of that, at least budgeted the majority of those dollars. But you're right, 2 years, unless we get another surplus of dollars. And again, we all know what those are spent on. PPE, Chromebooks, hotspots, the likes, all the things that we need for this environment that we are working in. Special revenue on slide 60, increase in classroom teachers, $3 million. Basically, that's $1 million for Title I, $1.5 million for the CARES program, summer school. We had summer school this year, and they budgeted for summer school next year as well. On the other certified instruction, that reduction of $1 million, you may recall we moved the ESC specialists to the general fund. So there was no elimination of units. They were moved to the general fund. The increase in paras, again, had to do with IDEA B units. Paras were moved from the general fund to IDEA B, as well as $200,000 for the CARES grant. $1,600 was receptionists and other non-12-month employees that work in the summer programs, and then, of course, IDEA B as well. Other purchase services on slide 61, professional and technical services, that decrease is due to the New Leaf program, the alternative program, that was moved to the general fund as well. It used to be paid out of IDEA B, and now the general fund is paying for that program. On rentals, that $1.3 million is due to the learning management system that the district is purchasing through the CARES dollars, as well as additional online software for digital learning. And then the infamous $3,700, that's where we're budgeting the hotspots. Again, from the CARES dollars. If I could take you to page 63, just to highlight 5,100 object consumable supplies. That's the PPE in the CARES dollars. And then 5,900 other supplies and materials. That includes the thermometers, the spray bottles that we're buying for every teacher in every classroom, and other COVID-related expenditures. On slide 64, I'll bring your attention to 6,400 object. That 5.1 represents the purchase of Chromebooks and Chromebook carts and other laptops.
Which one does? 61?
6,400.
6,400?
It says furniture, fixtures, and equipment, but that's where we record laptops, Chromebooks, and the Chromebook carts.
So that's where the majority of that was?
Yes, ma'am. Again, funded through the CARES grant.
Good.
So let's move to the Internal Service Fund, and if I could direct you to page 68. In the past, we had just an Internal Service Fund for our property casualty workers' comp. So you can see here that there's nothing really has changed about this. These are dollars that are transferred from the general fund so that they're set up in their own separate fund. The beginning balance is $4.2 million, and the transfer from general fund to in this fund total $4.8 million. Basically, what we're paying out of that is for claims expense, also for the actual property insurance. And there we have 2 employees, and the ending fund balance is projected to be $3.9 million. And our new fund on page 70 is the Internal Service Fund for health insurance. Again, these dollars are transferred from the general fund to this fund, and we will record the expenditures for this fund in the Internal Service Fund as well. What you are seeing is about a half year, a little under a half year, because remember, our health insurance is on a calendar basis, whereas our fiscal year is July to June. So what you're seeing here is about a half year of estimated expenditures, whether it's related to actual claims or services that we require to keep this fund functioning. The fund balance of 1.7 million is basically the dollar amount for the pro share. It's a little bit less because we added an employee to this fund to manage it. We expect this to change as we go through the year. As we develop what the actual expenditures are going to be, we will make budget adjustments. And we will see a savings at the end of the calendar year for 2021 and on. And that will get us to that fund balance requirement that we have to have in the health insurance. Are there any questions? I know I went through pretty quick, but I was trying to be mindful of your time.
You did great. Remember how many questions I used to have in the old days? You got it all. You've just worked it all in. I don't have any questions.
We try to pay attention to the things that you ask and incorporate them.
It's just, in the beginning, it went on, and you've just included it all, and I thank you so much. Wonderful.
You're welcome. It is our pleasure.
Thank
I
you.
want to acknowledge my staff because they spend hours and hours, just like everyone else, pulling together information, putting up with me asking question after question so that I'm prepared to speak before you. And they're a great team, and I want them to all know, even those that are listening, that they are appreciated. And we do appreciate your support as we go through this. And I'm sure Dr. Gullett will have us come back to you as we know more about funding, whether it's the general fund. We're monitoring attendance. We're going to be monitoring any possible cuts that may come in revenue after elections in November. So we'll be coming back to you probably more than we have normally done. And we will also be watching food service and the revenue stream there.
Thank you.
We have a session scheduled if needed next week. I don't know if you want to go ahead and
I think
cancel the budget part of it. You may have other items.
I don't have any questions.
I don't, she's just got it laid out.
so. The one thing that we might want to consider, because I think the transportation, because our ridership will be down, I think that's another a piece that we can take to our legislators to ask for a waiver for this year because the ridership is down. So I think we have a list of things that we really need to ask our legislators and to be sure that we're staying on top of that, because that could be a huge impact.
But we're usually spending more of the general fund anyway, aren't we?
Right.
Because of the way we're
an
sprawled.
allocation of about 10 million based on ridership, but the budget for transportation, including the garage, is in excess of 20 million.
Yeah, so even though
We just don't want to lose that 10
We don't want to
million.
lose that 10.
We want to be able to.
our ridership doesn't.
Because we know it's going to be down with the kids choosing it
And
online.
we should be encouraging it to be down and not getting penalized for that,
And not being
as far as
penalized.
social distancing.
So that's another.
That's a budget that it never covered us anyway.
No, ma'am. Not for districts our size.
No. It used to not be that bad. Wow, it's double now then. We used to not get hit that hard.
It's been growing
Yeah.
because
Wow.
you're talking about recurring costs. Like
So I remember when it was like 5 million more and 6, and now all the way up to 10 million more. Wow.
Thank you, Ms. Boston.
Thank you.
Mr. Knight, I'm sorry, any public comment on that one? Mr. Knight, you working against the clock.
Yeah. I was going to start talking before I got up here. Yeah, I'll wipe it down. All right, good morning again. So I'll do a little cleaning while I'm talking to you. You have a single sheet about cafeteria comparisons, North Marion High School and Osceola Middle. I do not have a PowerPoint for this segment. You may remember a couple of months ago, during a construction update, I reported that both projects looked to be heading over budget. It was better than $4 million at the time. So what we're doing today is bringing you an update for that. Osceola Middle, we already had the construction numbers, so that has not changed. When you look at the deficit, which is the difference between what we budgeted and what our known costs are, we're about $758,239 over budget on Osceola Middle School.
Ooh.
And again, that's with construction pricing. At North Marion High School, when we got the report from the contractors concerning the estimate, we went back and actually redesigned major sections of the schools or the cafeteria's structure, which impacted heating, ventilating, and air conditioning as well as electric. Plus, we were able to get a little bit of money from food service to offset the cost of food service equipment. And then finally, it was reported to us by finance there was a little more than $1 million coming in on millage that wasn't expected because we try to project conservatively as a district on taxes coming in, and it actually came up higher than the projection. So we put those funds in North Marion High to help take the sting out of the pricing, and that leaves us with a deficit of $1,657,185. So combined, both projects, we're short about $2,415,424, and that is, again, without a full-blown bid at North Marion High's cafeteria, with a bid at Osceola Middle School, and projecting what the furniture cost will be. But again, we were better than $4 million to the negative just a couple of months ago. So our options are obviously cancel one or both projects, postpone one or both, and fund one or both through other sources or projects. If you do entertain looking at taking money from what's in capital this year, there's only one project that we A, haven't started, and B, has enough funds in it to cover this entire deficit to do both cafeterias, and that would be the MTI HVAC replacement project. We have $4,650,000 sitting there. You're not going to spend maybe any of that money this fiscal year because it would take at least 8 to 10 months to go through programming, design, and get all the way to permit stage plus board approval before we could even price it. So you're going to be into the 21-22 fiscal year before you really spend anything at MTI, and that's only if you decide to do the project. You remember that we were possibly looking at parting ways with the ownership of that property, and so we really haven't spent anything at that facility other than bare maintenance needs.
How much money do you have?
$4,650,000 is sitting there for that, and it's not enough to do the entire project anyway, and so that would be out there fair game for utilizing it towards funding these two schools, and that's the only project that's not started and has that much money in it this fiscal year.
Is the air conditioning functioning?
It's functioning. It definitely, that whole campus needs serious work.
We know that.
We know that.
650 will not finish all we need. It'll take $1 million
I
easy
don't really
just
want
to
to
do
see
the.
us put any
I
money.
don't want to see us put any money into MTI. And I like the idea of completing both of these projects and taking the $2 million out of MTI. I really don't want to see us put any money into MTI, period.
I would say Band-Aid it until we can, like, just
Keep it
Band-Aid.
going as long as we can.
Band-Aid it however you have to, and
And obviously, I can always come back in the future to talk more specifically about not only MTI, but district spaces as we, I think the last time we spoke about that was January, and
Yeah.
COVID changed our world a bit, but
I think we put North Marion off for so long, and we need to get that taken care of. And if there's a way that, if this is your recommendation, that we pull it from the MTI, let's go ahead and
I'd say do both of these
let's
budgets and
get both of them done.
pull from those funds. Is my vote.
That would be mine too.
That is my vote too. I waited to see what my board members were going to say because thought I was going to have to get feisty. And I don't, and I'm very grateful for that.
I think we found a solution here.
Yeah, so I don't have to get feisty, so we're good.
You're the only one we didn't hear from.
My heart's in, let's do what's right for the schools with a lot of kids in them that have been waiting a very long time. So let's roll.
So you got consensus.
okay, I appreciate that. Just a final footnote on this. Obviously, the $2,415,000 figure is an estimate. What I'd like to do for the board, this could be $2,200,000, it could be $2,650,000, is I'd like permission from the board, if you're in agreement, to take what is needed. Obviously, we're going to come back to the board for price approval on both those projects, so we will know well in advance to tell the board, if you don't mind, it's another $50,000 higher than we thought, or it's $200,000 lower, but just don't want to make sure it wasn't just that figure. That's our estimate right now, so I appreciate your direction, and we'll take care of it and come back to you within a couple of months for both schools.
And with
Thank you.
remodeling, it's not a surprise that the budget is so crazy because the remodel budget's just incredible.
Prices have jumped almost 60%, or well, actually 1.5 times what it was just 2 years ago. And we just
We don't want to
cannot
wait
keep
any
pace.
longer.
If you look at our revenue, it stayed flatlined, and costs have just gone beyond the roof.
Thank you, Mr. Knight.
Okay, thank you.
Any public comment? Board members, we got to move fast.
I have one thing. I had a call from Interfaith Emergency Services about the backpack program, the Food for Kids. They've been told that they're not going to be able to drop the backpacks off at the schools, and that is, we certainly understand that because of health reasons. We need to be sure, and Mr. Vianello, I don't know if Mr. McAteer is the right person, but we need to be working with Interfaith on how do we make sure that these kids that need fed on the weekends, they have they want to do it. They just want us to tell them how they're going to do it. So, because those backpacks, we can't have them coming in and out right now. So how, and the reason behind the backpack is so the children are not bullied and made fun of because they know that they're taking food home. So there's got to be some creative way that we can work with that. And I have the young lady's name, which I will send to you, Dr. Gullett, from Interfaith, who called me yesterday. So we got to figure this one out.
We appreciate the support, and we'll make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
Attorney Green, anything?
I have nothing.
Dr. Gullett?
No.
Thank you, sir. I'll be very brief. I just wanted to share that next week at our work session, there are a couple of items I want to bring during the briefing. Facility usage that's come up at the table, we will provide an update and some options for the board to consider, and an update on the extracurricular activities as well. And then we will address the preparations for instructional disruption. So we will talk through that. Thank you.
Elena, I'm sorry.
I'm good, thank you.
Ms. McCall, anything else?
No, I'm good.
Ms. Stacy?
We need to move on.
I just have one thing, and Elena's trained me to write it, and my only question was, when we were discussing lunches, it made me think about, do we have the appropriate equipment to distribute the lunches to the classrooms? So it's gonna look a lot different, and like, in the past, it could be small, and I think it's gonna be a larger amount, so I was just trying to make sure that we're, thinking of the people that are distributing that in a timely manner. But I'll just send that to you. Thank you.
Ms. Starr?
Just quickly, thank you to all the employees that stepped up and volunteered to help work the polls for voting. August 18th, which is next Tuesday, is voting day. I'll be participating in that as well, and so it's good to have that partnership with Wesley Wilcox, and it's wonderful that quite a few employees stepped up to help, and I'm sure, knowing Wesley, that everything's going to go very smoothly with our voting in Marion County. That's all I have.
I do have one more thing. I want to thank the Paddock Mall and the Bullard Foundation for a fabulous event last Saturday. I was inside, Dr. Gullett was outside. We handed out thousands of backpacks and school supplies. So I do want to thank Ashley Wheeler-Gerds and her team. Very well organized, very well done. So thank you, Paddock Mall.
All right, guys, I don't have any comments. We're just going to continue to move forward and do what we need to do. So we're going to adjourn this work session at 11:29 and move straight to our attorney-client session.